Did you know that you could advertise on this channel? Well, you can. Call 815-290-9087 and talk to me today about advertising on our channel. We get over 3,500 hits. We also have a thriving website. We can come up with all sorts of packages for you and make things happen together. Again, that's 815-290-9087 or visit braddrake.net. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Spotlight with Brad Drake. Today, we are going to be discussing, is that $200 an hour? This is the famous incident that took place at SummerSlam '89 with Gene Okerlund, Rick Rude, and Bobby Heenan present. I was a 7-year-old child watching this pay-per-view live when this incident took place. The SummerSlam '89 placard that was behind Okerlund, Rude, and Heenan suddenly fell off of the wall. And Okerlund, who was excited at the time, yelled out, "Fuck it!" And then seconds later you heard, "Is that $200 an hour?" Now I remember seeing this live as a kid, and all of us went silent and kind of stared at each other. Yeah, sure, we knew the F word, but we didn't use that word in my home, especially my parents did not. And it was just a shocking thing to hear and to see. And, years later, I noticed whenever there was a copy of SummerSlam that was conveniently erased from it, but we still had our original VHS from 1989 that had that on there. And I'll never forget it. It always sticks out to me in my memory of watching wrestling as a youth. So there's a lot of interesting things with this interview that took place. And I think this is a fun opportunity here on Spotlist, brought to you by the PowerCast Network, patreon.com/PowerCast Network. It's a good opportunity to take a look at what is going on in the World Wrestling Federation at this time. So there's a lot of you that are younger that probably are not familiar with the story of SummerSlam or even pay-per-views in general. And WrestleMania 1, which was 1985, was the first true pay-per-view for wrestling. Before this, things had been done on closed-circuit television. And if you don't know what closed-circuit television means, it means you would go somewhere and they would show this on a movie screen or something along those lines called closed circuit. So I think Las Vegas still has it to this day for UFC fights. They'll actually still have closed circuit television for UFC fights because there's a blackout in the town the night of UFC fights. So, for example, like Madison Square Garden had like a whole separate area where you could pay to go in and see closed circuit and see events being played. And this would happen around the country in movie theaters and stuff like that. Well, finally things progressed to Cablevision and other outlets where it became pay-per-view. So you would call up and you would pay, and then your cable box would get the pay-per-view when the pay-per-view started. When I was a kid, this was so exciting because all day long, like they would show like clips and stuff on there, and then it would all get all scrambled like seconds before, and then bam, the pay-per-view would start. And man, I tell you, as a kid, that was exciting. And I was lucky enough to have a family where my parents bought pay-per-views. I think they started with WrestleMania 4, and I think we ended at WrestleMania 6. I don't think they bought any more pay-per-views after WrestleMania 6 because my brother and I were so upset when Hulk Hogan lost the title to the Ultimate Warrior that I think that was it. My dad said, "That's it. We're not buying these anymore." So let's fast forward here. And in 1988, the WWF starts its second pay-per-view series, which is SummerSlam. And so by 1989, there's now 3 pay-per-views because in January of '89, they started the Royal Rumble on pay-per-view. So SummerSlam '89 was a really big deal. And if we take a look at the show, it was, of course, held at the Meadowlands Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It was a sellout of 20,000 people. And Gene Okerlund was probably the greatest interviewer of all time. I understand there was some really good ones in Southern wrestling and in other territories and stuff like that. But Gene Okerlund was just the man. He had that radio baritone voice, and he was just so silky smooth with his delivery. And the guy was just excellent. And Gene Okerlund came to the WWF from the AWA, where he had been for a great period of time, and he was a DJ in Minneapolis before that. So allegedly, legend tells us that when Hulk Hogan signed with the WWF, he insisted that Gene Okerlund was also signed, and that indeed was the case. So Gene Okerlund made his debut in late 1983, November, December. I can't exactly get clarification on that. And he just immediately picked up where he had left off in the AWA, doing his interviews, and he even worked as a color commentary on a couple events, television shows, that kind of stuff. But he was just silky smooth. So by 1989, summer of 1989, I can say August 28th, 1989 to be specific, he had been with the WWF for over 5 years at this point, nearing 6 years. Silky smooth. Now, Bobby Heenan started with the WWF in 1984, and he was another defector from the AWA. And of all the defectors from the AWA, he was the only one that worked out his notice. That means he gave proper notice to Vern Gagne and worked out the rest of his dates. Everybody else just left. So that included Jesse Ventura, David Schultz, Hulk Hogan, and several others. They just left and left the AWA cold. Vince McMahon had previously tried to purchase the AWA from Vern Gagne. Vern Gagne wouldn't sell it to him, so now the McMahon was on a vendetta. The WWF was on a vendetta to put AWA out of business the hard way. As we talked about earlier, he started taking all of Vern Gagne's venues. He started taking all of Vern Gagne's time slots in television. And now he was stealing all of his talent to the point where I quote Greg Gagne as saying the WWF became looking more like the AWA than the AWA, ending that quote. So, Bobby Heenan is well established at the WWF at this point. He has his stable of wrestlers called the Heenan family, and of course, included in that stable of wrestlers at this point is ravishing Rick Rude, who has won the Intercontinental Heavyweight title from the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 5, which took place on April 2nd of 1989 earlier in the year. So we have a big card on this show between Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Heavyweight title. Now let's talk a little bit about Rick Rude. Rick Rude made his debut for the WWF July 15th, 1987, and he had been a very prolific wrestler for Jim Crockett Promotions, holding one half of their World Tag Team title with Manny Fernandez just before he left for the WWF. And again, he left in a hostile fashion too. He was just World Tag Team Champion one day and then gone shortly after. So Rick Rude had made his way around some territories at this point. He was in Texas before this. Obviously, we just stated that he was in World Class. And Rick Rude was absolutely a force. He was a tall, very, very muscular, but not that beefed up 80s muscular type. He was slimmed down, just cut, jacked, $1 million body. Rick Rude was 6'5", probably went 230, and he was. A lot of wrestlers were big and bulky back then. Rick Rude was chiseled and had a unique look, and he was pretty darn good on the microphone, and he had 100% terrific chemistry with Bobby Heenan, and they were gold together. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Rick Rude was as tough as nails. He was a mean SOB and could really hurt you if he had to. And it was just a great combination for him. And at this point, he was locked in that feud with the Ultimate Warrior for quite some time. So they're having their big blow-off here at SummerSlam for the Intercontinental Heavyweight title, of which the Ultimate Warrior would win that title back on the card here. And this is the culmination of, and this is what everything that's going on leading up to this interview. So I can remember being this young kid watching this interview and being so excited, and SummerSlam was just a big deal. Pay-per-views don't have much meaning anymore because they're so often, but back then this was like once a quarter. So once every 3 months, you were going to get a big card like this, and they would hype it for months and months and months on TV, and you would see the ads constantly. And when you were in school, it's all you and your friends talked about was the big show coming up. We didn't understand the concept of house shows back then. Yeah, we knew the WWF came to town, every once in a while, but we didn't realize that Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude were actually wrestling each other all over the country every single night. We just saw what we saw on TV and thought, well, this is how it is. And they're going to wrestle for the first time coming up here. Little did we know that these two had wrestled each other probably a couple hundred times before this. And Bobby Heenan has actually talked about this previously, about how awful in the ring the Ultimate Warrior was, and how Rick Rude laid into him a couple times to straighten him out from being a bit too stiff with Rick Rude. So again, being a young kid, being super excited to see this card, and just pumped up for SummerSlam and how cool it was. And this interview comes on, and we hear what we hear. And I remember it was just silent in my family room. We couldn't believe what we had seen. So now, fast forward about 18 years to Bruce Pritchard's podcast. And I hear him talk about this for the first time and what took place. Apparently, this was a pre-taped interview that had been taped earlier, and the board fell down and they retaped it. Somebody put the wrong clip in, and instead of putting the retape in, accidentally put this one in. So you got to wonder if that poor soul even had a job after this, because everybody knows and has heard over the years how serious and particular and just dead set that Vince McMahon was on everything. And then to have a clip like this hit, and get out there accidentally, it makes sense why I never saw it again years later. When all the videotapes came out and everything else made total sense. But, as a kid, I just remember seeing it. And, Vince McMahon had to be mad. I guarantee you, whoever was in the production truck that day was out of a job shortly after this came out. But that was the story. That's the true story of what took place, is that this was accidentally aired. It had been pulled earlier. So everybody, please, I hope you enjoy this clip, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wrestling Spotlight with Brad Drake. Thanks so much.
Gentlemen, as you know, the Ultimate Warrior. Fuck it. It's publicly stated that, damn it, who put that up? Is that $200 an hour?